My husband claimed he needed space, but I found the truth: he was building a life with another woman. Now, I'm reclaiming my life and peace. I, 34F, have been married to my husband Mark, 35M, for 10 years. We have 2 kids, a daughter, 8, and a son, 5. Up until 6 months ago, I thought we had the perfect life: good jobs, a nice house in the suburbs, family vacations. Now I'm watching my marriage implode and trying to understand how my husband went from being an amazing father and partner to someone I honestly don't even recognize anymore. Let me start from the beginning. Mark and I met in our mid-20s, through mutual friends at a housewarming party. He was everything I was looking for: charismatic, ambitious, and seemingly genuine in his desire to build a future together. We dated for 2 years, during which he showed me nothing but love, respect, and dedication. When he proposed during a quiet evening at home, because he knew I hated public proposals, I thought I had found my forever person. We got married in a small ceremony, surrounded by family and friends. The early years were wonderful. We both had promising careers, supported each other's dreams, and worked together to build our life. We bought our dream house in the suburbs, a beautiful colonial with a big backyard where we planned to raise our family. When our daughter Emma arrived 3 years into our marriage, Mark was the perfect father, taking paternity leave and handling midnight feedings like a champion. Lucas followed 3 years later, and our family felt complete. Mark worked in corporate sales, while I managed accounts at a marketing firm. We both earned good money, but Mark's career really took off about 5 years into our marriage. He climbed the corporate ladder steadily, and I was genuinely proud of his success. We had a comfortable life, took nice vacations, and were able to start college funds for both kids. More importantly, we seemed happy. Sure, we had normal married couple disagreements, but we always worked through them together. Everything started changing about 8 months ago when Mark got promoted to regional director at his company. The position came with a significant pay raise and more responsibilities, which we both knew would mean some adjustments to our family life. At first, the changes were subtle and completely understandable. The late nights at work became more frequent, which made sense given his new role overseeing teams across multiple states. He'd miss dinner with us maybe once or twice a week, but he always texted ahead to let me know and would try to make it up by spending extra time with the kids on weekends. I was supportive of his career growth and tried to manage things at home to make his transition easier. I took on more of the childcare responsibilities, handled all the household chores, and tried to be understanding when he seemed stressed or distant. The dynamic shifted gradually but unmistakably. The missed dinners turned into missed weekends. His texts became shorter, more impersonal, often just working late or don't wait up. He started coming home late, smelling of unfamiliar cologne, claiming he'd borrowed it from a colleague after going to the gym. When I tried to talk to him about the changes in our relationship, he'd get defensive and accuse me of not supporting his career advancement. He'd remind me that his new position was benefiting our whole family and that I was being selfish for complaining about his long hours. The first real red flag came when I noticed changes in our finances. Mark and I had always maintained a joint account for household expenses and savings while keeping separate accounts for our personal spending, an arrangement that had worked well for our entire marriage. One day, while logging in to pay our monthly bills, I noticed several large transfers from our joint account to an account I didn't recognize. These weren't small amounts, we're talking thousands of dollars at a time. When I brought it up that evening, Mark brushed it off as business expenses that would be reimbursed soon. He explained that sometimes he needed to front money for client entertainment and corporate events, and the reimbursement process could take a few weeks. It sounded plausible enough, especially given his new position, but something about his explanation felt rehearsed. I might have believed him if it weren't for what happened next. While doing laundry one weekend, I found a receipt in his pocket from a high-end jewelry store for a $5,000 bracelet purchased 2 weeks before. My birthday had passed months ago, and our anniversary wasn't for another 6 months. The kids were too young for such an expensive gift, and none of our close relatives had birthdays coming up. When I confronted him about it, Mark's reaction was explosive. He accused me of spying on him and invading his privacy, saying he was allowed to spend his own money however he wanted. He stormed out and didn't come home that night, claiming he needed to cool off at a friend's house. That's when I started paying closer attention to everything. Mark had changed all his passwords on his devices and accounts, but he'd forgotten about our shared cloud storage where our family photos were automatically backed up. New photos had started appearing, pictures of him with a woman I'd never seen before, at restaurants and hotels I knew we'd never visited together. They looked intimate, comfortable with each other in a way that made my stomach churn. In some photos, they were dressed up for what looked like business events. In others, they were clearly on personal outings, holding hands or sharing private moments. I was still trying to figure out how to handle this discovery when Mark said he needed to go on a 2-week business trip to Europe. He claimed it was a last-minute requirement from corporate, but I'd never known his company to arrange international trips without weeks of advance planning. I decided to do some serious digging while he was away. As it turned out, the Europe trip wasn't entirely a lie. He did have some business meetings there. But expense reports showed he'd extended the trip by a week and Sarah had joined him for part of it, all charged to our joint account. Those 2 weeks gave me the time and space I needed to compile everything I'd discovered. Through our joint account records, I found recurring payments for an apartment lease. The lease had started 3 months after his promotion. There were also numerous charges from upscale restaurants, hotels, and shopping destinations, all on dates when he'd claimed to be working late or traveling for business. The amounts were staggering, especially considering these were clearly personal expenses being paid from our joint account. But the final straw came when Emma innocently mentioned that Daddy's friend Sarah had picked her up from school one day when I was stuck in a meeting. I had never authorized anyone named Sarah to pick up my children, and Mark had never mentioned this person to me. When I checked with the school, they confirmed that Mark had added this woman to the approved pickup list months ago, listing her as a family friend. The thought of this stranger, who I now suspected was the woman from the photos, having access to my children made me feel physically ill. That's when I knew I needed professional help. I contacted a lawyer and began methodically documenting everything. My lawyer advised me to keep things as normal as possible while we built our case, which was honestly one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. For 6 excruciating weeks, I maintained the facade of a normal marriage while gathering evidence. I discovered he'd been systematically moving money not just from our joint accounts into private accounts, but also making withdrawals from our investment accounts. He was clearly preparing for a future I wasn't meant to be part of. Living this double life, being both the supportive wife and the betrayed spouse gathering evidence, took a tremendous toll on me. I lost weight, couldn't sleep, and found myself jumping every time my phone buzzed with a notification. My close friends noticed the change in me, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them what was happening. I felt ashamed, as if somehow Mark's betrayal was a reflection on me. But last week, Mark came home earlier than usual and announced he needed to talk. He sat me down at our kitchen table and told me he thought we should separate. He claimed we'd grown apart and that he needed space to figure things out. He had already found an apartment, he said, and thought it would be best if he moved out immediately. What he didn't know was that I was prepared for this conversation. When he finished his speech, I calmly placed a folder on the table between us. Inside was everything I'd discovered. His face went pale as he realized what he was looking at. That's when everything spilled out. Sarah wasn't just a colleague, she was someone he'd met at a conference last year, and they'd been seeing each other for months. The apartment wasn't new, it was where they'd been meeting all along. The money he'd been moving wasn't for business expenses, it was his escape fund for a new life with her. He'd been planning to leave for months, carefully orchestrating his exit while keeping up appearances. I let him talk, let him try to justify his actions. He claimed he hadn't meant for it to happen, that it had started as just friendship and evolved into something more. He said he'd tried to fight his feelings for her, but couldn't. He even had the audacity to suggest that our marriage had been struggling for years, despite all evidence to the contrary. When he finished, I simply handed him another document, the divorce papers my lawyer had prepared. His expression shifted from shock to anger to resignation in the span of seconds. He took the papers without a word and left the house. That was 3 days ago. I'm still processing everything that's happened, trying to figure out how to move forward. The kids are staying with my sister this weekend while I sort things out. My lawyer assures me we have a strong case for a favorable divorce settlement given the evidence we've gathered, especially regarding his financial deceptions and unauthorized use of our joint funds. But that's small comfort when I think about how our family has been torn apart. I would appreciate any advice from others who have been through something similar. How did you explain it to your kids? How did you move forward? How long did it take before things started feeling normal again? Edit, thank you for all the supportive comments and messages. To address some common questions, my lawyer and I have been thorough with protecting ourselves legally and financially. I've made copies of all financial records, text messages, photos, and other evidence, storing them in multiple locations, cloud storage, USB drives at my sister's house, and hard copies with my lawyer. We've documented all bank statements, credit card bills, and investment account records from the past 18 months, along with photos and screenshots of everything suspicious, including that jewelry receipt and apartment lease. My lawyer keeps reminding me to record any new developments as they happen. As for the kids' situation at school, we're trying to maintain some stability by keeping them at their current school for now. The administration and their teachers are aware of what's happening, and the guidance counselor is keeping an extra eye on them. We immediately revoked Mark's girlfriend's pickup authorization after everything came to light. Since their current school is closer to Mark's place, I'm looking into other options for next semester, specifically focusing on schools in my area that have good counseling services. I've taken several steps to secure our finances. All 3 joint credit cards are frozen, and I've opened a new personal account at a different bank for my paychecks. Every password has been changed: email, social media, banking, phone, everything. I set up credit monitoring to catch any new accounts he might try to open. I've documented all the money he's moved or withdrawn recently and created a detailed spreadsheet of our assets and debts. I'm also putting aside whatever I can in a separate account for legal fees. The current custody and living situation is temporary but stable. I have primary custody, with Mark getting every other weekend, supervised for now. He has to give 24-hour notice before contacting the kids. I'm staying in the house with them, and I've changed all the locks and security system codes. I also installed security cameras around the house, maybe paranoid, but better safe than sorry. I'm keeping a detailed log of all his visits and interactions with the kids. Update number 1: It's been 3 weeks since my last post, and I want to thank everyone who commented with support and advice. Your stories and suggestions have been incredibly helpful during this difficult time. A lot has happened, and I need to share the updates. The divorce proceedings are underway, and it's been interesting, to say the least. Mark initially tried to claim that he should get 50% custody of the kids, despite having spent minimal time with them over the past year. When my lawyer presented evidence of his absences, including detailed records of missed events and the unauthorized school pickup situation with Sarah, the tone of those discussions quickly changed. His lawyer has since suggested a more realistic custody arrangement. The financial aspect has been more complicated than we initially thought. We discovered that Mark had been moving more money than I initially realized, not just from our joint accounts and investment portfolios, but from our children's college funds as well. When confronted about this in mediation, he claimed he was protecting the money, but couldn't explain why he needed to protect it from me, their mother. The mediator and his own lawyer seemed unimpressed with this explanation. We also uncovered that he had opened several credit cards in his name alone and charged significant amounts to them, presumably for his life with Sarah. While these aren't technically joint debts, the fact that he used our shared resources to make payments on them is becoming a major point of contention in the divorce negotiations. The kids are struggling, but we're getting professional help. I found a wonderful child therapist who specializes in divorce cases, and both Emma and Lucas have started seeing her weekly. Emma's having a harder time than her brother. She's old enough to understand more of what's happening, and she's angry with her father. She refuses to talk to him during his scheduled phone calls and had a meltdown when he tried to take her to dinner last week. Lucas just seems confused and keeps asking when Daddy's coming home. The therapist says these are normal reactions and we need to give them time to process everything. Mark's attempts to maintain his image in our social circle have been almost comical. He's been telling everyone who'll listen that our marriage had been failing for years and that he only stayed for the kids. Our mutual friends know better. They've seen how he changed over the past year and how happy we were before that. Several have shown me messages from him trying to convince them to take his side, but they've been surprisingly supportive of me. Sarah, his girlfriend, finally reached out to me last week. Apparently, she had no idea Mark was still living with me and the kids. He told her we'd been separated for over a year and were just keeping up appearances for family reasons. When she discovered the truth through mutual acquaintances, she ended things with him. Now he's angry at both of us, as if we're somehow responsible for the consequences of his actions. She apologized profusely and offered to provide a statement from my lawyer about when their relationship started and what Mark had told her about our marriage. I'm focusing on rebuilding my life one day at a time. I've started therapy for myself, returned to my yoga practice, and am spending more quality time with the kids. I've also started looking into going back to work full-time. I had scaled back to part-time when Lucas was born, but now I need to think about supporting my family on my own. The lawyer fees are substantial, but everyone assures me it's to a proper representation given the complexity of our situation. Mark's behavior continues to be erratic. Some days he's apologetic and wants to talk about reconciliation, now that Sarah's gone. Other days he's angry and threatening. My lawyer has advised me to document all communication and only interact with him through official channels or in the presence of witnesses. Update number 2, final. Hey everyone. Sorry for taking so long to update. Life has been absolutely crazy with the divorce proceedings, work, the kids, and everything else. I know some of you have been messaging me asking for updates. Thank you for your support, and I finally have time to sit down and write this. 8 months have passed since my last update, and after what feels like endless court appearances, mediation sessions, and legal back and forth, we've finally reached a resolution. The divorce was finalized last week after nearly a year of proceedings, and the terms are better than I expected, largely thanks to the evidence we gathered and Mark's increasingly erratic behavior during the proceedings. The turning point in the legal negotiations came about 6 months into the proceedings when Mark tried to claim our house as his primary residence, despite having lived in his apartment alone for months after Sarah left him, in an attempt to force its sale. To everyone's surprise, he managed to convince Sarah to come to a mediation session as his character witness. I guess he thought she'd help his case since they'd been together. That backfired spectacularly when she instead told the truth about their relationship timeline and his lies, directly contradicting statements he'd made under oath about when their relationship began. I later found out he'd promised to make things right with her if she helped him, but she chose to be honest instead. His attempt to control the narrative completely fell apart after that. The mediator's report was scathing, noting Mark's pattern of deception and financial impropriety. In the end, I'm keeping the house in primary custody of the kids. Mark got his precious apartment and his car, plus visitation rights that he'll probably barely use, judging by his recent behavior. He's been ordered to pay back the money he took from the children's college funds, plus child support and a portion of my legal fees. The financial settlement was more favorable than we initially hoped. The judge was particularly unimpressed with Mark's unauthorized use of our joint funds and his attempts to hide assets. He's required to repay every penny he took from the kids' college funds, plus interest, and the division of assets took into account his previous spending on Sarah. His company's HR department also got involved after discovering he'd been falsifying expense reports to cover some of his personal spending, which led to him being placed on probation at work. We've had to make some adjustments to the custody schedule. Mark's visits are now strictly supervised after he tried to introduce the kids to a new girlfriend without consulting me or their therapist. Yes, he's already dating someone new. The supervision requirement will be reviewed in 6 months, depending on his behavior and the children's progress in therapy. For now, it's working well, the kids feel safer, and there's less drama during handoffs. As for me, I'm starting to feel like myself again. I've reconnected with old friends, started a small side business doing freelance marketing work from home, and am even thinking about dating again, though that's way in the future. To everyone going through something similar, it gets better. Focus on yourself and your kids, document everything, and don't be afraid to ask for help. There's life after betrayal, and sometimes it's better than you could have imagined.